I'd like to welcome everybody along to our education panel as part of the Robotify Expo. Thank you all for being here. My name is Stuart. I'm the head of education here at Robotify. Our panelists today are Seema Naik, Dr. Kathleen Schofield, and Sturman. I'd like to get you each to introduce yourselves first. Just give us a quick rundown of yourselves, what it is you do in education, your speciality, and what brought you into STEM education in particular. So Seema, we can start with you.
Hi, my name is Seema, and it's my real pleasure to be here to join my fellow STEM educators. I teach elementary school Eagle Ridge Elementary, Coral Springs, Florida, in the United States. I have been science teacher from pre-K to grade 5, and I'm a certified robotics coach for our award-winning club for past 4 years. I have a master's in engineering, and I have been teaching as an educator for about 18 years. So coming into STEM education is very exciting for me because being an engineer, I'm very passionate about science and STEM throughout my teaching career. And I constantly seek opportunities to engage my students through interdisciplinary projects involving coding and physical computing.
Fantastic, great. Dr. Schofield, you're up next.
Yes, good morning. I'm Kathy Schofield. I'm the executive director of a Florida-based nonprofit called the STEM2 Hub. And I have been a classroom teacher. I have worked in the business sector, and I also have been an administrator in a Florida school district. And at that time, I noticed that there was not a single robotics program in our district. I noticed that also where there was robotics, it was for the more affluent children, and there was no equity in the space. So I worked to build a robotics program in my district, and then I was asked to join the STEM Hub to help accelerate access to robotics, computer science and coding, and STEM in general for my region in Northeast Florida, as well as across our state. So I'm honored to be here today. Thank you for having me.
It's lovely to have you. And then Tree, if you want to introduce yourself there.
Yes, hi, Sturman. I'm a adolescent guide or junior high guide at the Children's House Montessori in Traverse City, Michigan. So much colder than my other two partners here on the stage here. I'm also the odd person out in that I'm a botany teacher. So I came into the robotics side of things from a desire to use technology to essentially to protect and conserve the environment. So coming into well, STEM, the science part of it has been my whole career, been a science teacher for the last 9 years. And then before that worked for environmental nonprofits doing conservation education work. So, and I increasingly saw how particularly things like drones, ROVs, and robotics in general was being used as a conservation tool. And so bringing that into the classroom was a logical connection. Our math teacher is a technology geek, and so we connected together around bringing that technology side and environmental conservation side together. And we built underwater robots, brought them down to Florida, actually, to the Florida Keys. And then we started getting into more of the robots with wheels and propellers and things more recently.
Great, fantastic. So we've got quite a range of experience and coming from very different kind of starts in STEM education. That's great to hear. You guys are the experts. We really want to get your voice on STEM education and robotics and coding inside the education system, and what we can do in that area. So the first topic I'd like to start with is around some of the challenges. I'd like to sort of set the scene and get you guys to talk about what are your views on the challenges facing STEM education at the moment. Dr. Schofield, you already actually mentioned something there around equality and equity. In your view, what are those main challenges in STEM education?
So to me, the main challenges in STEM education do start with equity at the heart. I've noticed that over the last little bit of time, let's call it the past 5 years, there's been a shift from STEM education taking place in out of school and after school to being brought into the classroom through the core content areas. And our wonderful panelists here are living examples of how that is possible. But in so many cases, the children who need STEM experiences the most, that are very problem-based and project-based, very hands-on, they may also be the same children who struggled with reading or who struggle in math. And rather than allowing the time to immerse them in an experience where they'll be engaged and learn those skills through application, we tend to put them into a double math block or a double reading block. So the challenge in my eyes is helping people see that correlation between learning the material that's required by standards compared to the traditional approach or the non-traditional approach using STEM education. And when we can carve out the time, we see student engagement rise, we see their sense of belong in a STEM career or pathway rise, and we see their grades rise. So, so to me, helping people evolve to see how robotics, how flying a drone, how coding is teaching core content, and then preparing our teachers to know how to use those tools to empower students.
Great. Tree or Seema, how does that gel with your experience of those challenges?
I totally agree with Kathleen, because we see that all the time, the lack of equity across the board. And one of the things that I would like to talk about is also lack of trained teacher force. Because most teachers, I see, especially in elementary school, even at the middle school level, they don't feel confident teaching science and STEM, and because it's a content area. So it's one of the things that I see as a challenge is the trained teacher force having a lack of things I would say is like a science and technology rich curriculum. It's just like what Kathleen, piggyback on Kathleen, integrating technology, for the equity purpose, the students who really need the most. And once they are given those opportunities, it reflects on the other curriculum area, because coding and robotics allow them to, enhance their critical thinking, problem solving, and so they can in turn bring those skills to their, reading comprehension. So during my science teaching career, I have seen that the kids who come from special needs, they are like excited walking into the lab and say, okay, what is Mr. Naik doing today? And then you see that they do improve, but we need to really work in that area. That's one of the challenge. I would say that too.
I would agree and echo with everything that Kathleen and Seema said. Also jump on, so having done this from the outside in for 10 years, out from environmental nonprofits, serving schools, and then now from within a school, working with outside providers like Robotify. It's really important that I think that everybody has the opportunity to access this, and not just equity in terms of socioeconomic equity, but also in terms of those students, like Kathleen was saying, that may not necessarily be directed towards robotics because the school has pigeonholed them in some way to they need to work on their reading or whatever it may be. And we have a great example. Right now, we're in the process of planning a robotics competition at our school. And we have, start off with a few of the more robotics oriented students and then expanded massively into all the students, because in planning a robotics competition, there's all the elements from getting sponsors to organizing, ordering t-shirts, organizing the food, and the actual robotics part. So you really get to bring people into the fold that may not think that robotics is necessarily for them, for whatever reason. We're junior high, so maybe it's not cool for them if that's not what they're interested in. But it actually makes it a community activity. And in making it a community activity, you bring everyone into the fold. And then those folks that may not think, oh, I'm not a robotics person, they start looking at, well, what are those folks doing over there? Oh, that looks really interesting. Actually, you should probably put that part there or there. And then people get more involved that wouldn't necessarily be involved. And there's a great book that I recommend everybody read. It's by Jal Mehta. He's a Harvard University School of Education professor. It's called In Search of Deeper Learning. And what he found in looking at schools, that it's actually those, what he calls the peripheral activities, the clubs, the after school activities, things like robotics, in which the deepest learning actually occurs. Now, that's not saying don't put robotics as part of the curriculum. It's also really important to do that. But at the same time, to have those after school, those informal, what they used to call, or non-formal activities, that's really where you get the magic really starts happening. At least that's been my experience.
Great. Just from your point of view, then, it's interesting to hear from your point of view, like some of the challenges, and I can already hear ways that you see robotics kind of helping to address those challenges by engaging with things like critical thinking, like Seema said, by using robotics in that community mindset, like Tree said there, and then also bringing it kind of into mainstream, into classrooms as well. It's great to hear that kind of feedback coming from you guys. So then to focus in on coding and robotics in particular, I'd be really interested in hearing what your experience of coding and robotics in education has been, in terms of the support you've had, how you applied in classrooms, engagement with students, anything along those lines, really digging into your experience around those. Seema, I think it's probably a great place to start with yourself with that.
Okay, so my experience of coding in robotics education, it's been a blast. As I mentioned, my engineering work experience into classroom, I bring that. I'm always teaching my students to be problem solvers. So I seek out every opportunity, and I'm going to give an example of Robotify. This summer when that our STEM department announced this challenge, and my students were in 4th grade, and it says grade 5 to 12. And so I went to them and I said, hey, my kids are technically in 5th grade. Can they participate? And they said, yes, they can. They are in 5th grade. So the excitement from the students, excitement from, having them go through all these process, it's honestly I would say it's amazing. The students who are also part of our after school robotics program that has been in our school for the past 4 years, they have continued their journey. They are already in middle school and they are the mentors. They come back and then they teach my elementary school teachers and our kids. And those are the biggest advantages that I see, that you ignite and inspire the students from a young age. So I can't stress that enough, that we need to have that from a very young age, from kindergarten and then across, going all the way. And then especially like girls, like we started a club with all girl power, with the robotics, and then they went all the way to the world competition with Vex Robotics. So I would say sky is the limit. So my experience has been really, really rewarding. So
great.
far.
And is that similar to your own experiences, Tree and Kathleen, sorry. Kathleen,
yeah, I'll jump
in.
Oh, quite right. So I'll jump in. Yes. So we were, because of COVID, actually, and this is a situation where COVID helped us deepen our robotics experience. Normally we would do underwater robotics and with the whole group. But because of COVID, we couldn't go out and do those things that we normally do, visit our local community college, which has an incredible underwater robotics lab, and go down to Florida. We couldn't do any of those things. So we had to find a way to create a deepen the classroom part of things, which for us as a Montessori school, we like to go out and do things. So in the classroom in front of computers is not necessarily what we do normally. So finding Robotify and then having all of our students be able to do the various aspects of robotics, from the coding to the actual construction, and then of course the planning pieces that I was talking about before, it really worked. And particularly the Robotify piece, using Scratch, which is such an intuitive tool, and I think everybody can figure out how to do that. Eventually you drag things around and figure it out, and Robotify makes it very intuitive for them to do that. And then having the kind of the robo duel part of that, so it turned it into a little bit of a competition. Our kids really, really loved that and started, cheering for each other. Oh, and we had the little competition internally with that at the end of the workshop. So it was really amazing. And I'm, again, coming from this botany biology side of things, this was new to me, but I was able to pick up on it really quickly. And then thus able to help my students with it. So it really does appeal to a broad range of student interests and student personalities. And that is so important as a classroom teacher, because you don't want kids sitting in the corner disengaged from any workshop or activity that you do.
And
Kathleen?
to pick up on what you said and also what Seema said, as you know, the pandemic is definitely a point of acceleration. We saw the same thing. And platforms like Robotify and Code.org and some of the virtual tools that exist really actually helped us while we work with districts to bring things into the school day. What we also found was when we were supporting our after school programs, we'd be running around like crazy people trying to get into every location. We were able to actually expand both our geographic reach and our number of centers that we were able to support with robotics because of online tools that were engaging. We could have a Zoom, we could do a little bit of instruction, even pre-record instruction, that then the people in the centers could play and move at their own pace. And we were able to go from being able to do a good job of supporting maybe 7 programs to supporting over 40 programs. So the digital tools are what has really made that possible. And to your earlier point, Seema, also the teacher professional development piece, we have got to help make our educators comfortable to be able to bring this into their classroom. And so in July, we did a computer science festival. We had Robotify had a wonderful segment of that where we had virtual drone flying contests. And we really learned to embrace the tools. But there's a balance there because we still need to have the physical experiences coupled with the digital experiences. And what we're discovering in the workplace is that's more and more what the world is looking like. So we really have found that so much has empowered us to move beyond the pandemic, and virtual platforms are really a key to that being able to happen.
I'd really like to pick up on that thread. All three of you have mentioned either using Robotify or talked a little bit about the virtual robotics and coding experience. And I'd really like to pick up on that thread and maybe explore a little bit, what differences do you see? What kind of advantages do you see in using that, disadvantages, that kind of thing? If anybody would like to pick up on that thread, that'd be great.
Well, you need to have access to broadband. I mean, that is a big piece. And I think, at least in our country, why our government's pushing so hard to build that broadband infrastructure, which is super important. I mean, even for us, we're in a pretty relative rural area of northern Michigan. So our school, once we had everybody on simultaneously doing Robotify, the rest of the school kind of complained because we were slowing down our internet access. So that's just one little piece, but it is really important component of the whole picture of getting students engaged in STEM education, because of all the access. I mean, the access pieces that Kathleen was talking about. When I was working in Chicago, trying to engage all the schools in the Chicagoland area, I was driving all over the place. I mean, if this technology existed back then, it would have made my life a lot easier. So that's a huge asset. At the same time, the robotics competitions, the actual physical competitions, we participate in VEX, V5, and IQ. But to be able to physically go to a competition, to meet other students that are interested in that same work, that community piece is also hugely important. So I think it's part of the equation. I don't think it can be the only piece. I think it has to be part of a tapestry of engagement tools.
I would like to add what Tree just said. I 100% agree what you just said. One of the biggest advantage I feel that the virtual tools, they help easy access for the students, from home, from school, and especially with pandemic, we all learned that. And they could also work on their own pace. That's the biggest thing, that they are not rushed, because as a classroom teacher, I find that you are always running out of time. There's not enough time. And creativity, problem solving, critical thinking, those are the important skills to develop and enhance those skills. You need time. Kids need time to work on it, find different solutions. And one of the advantage of these competitions, either that's face-to-face or online, like Robotify, like my students were practicing within themselves. And I love how you have those tutorials, like step by step, so they could walk through those. It was simple. They could learn, and I would meet them on the Microsoft Teams, and I said, hey guys, any questions? So it was very easy for me to, as an educator, to communicate and be a facilitator for them, and it was quite engaging. But yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
If I could add to what you said, both the competition piece when the kids do get together in real life, and then that coding piece where they have to take their time and process and think algorithmically through a problem. You're right. We really need both pieces of that. And if you look at what's the why, right? Because the world has changed so much. Technology has evolved so quickly. And you can't go through a day where you're not being influenced by something with technology. Your car, when I get in my car, I feel like I'm inside a robot. And because of my robotics experience, the very first thing I thought when I drove my car that wants to stop by itself and steer itself, I'm like, where are the sensors and how many are there? So that transition to the why make time for it, is because we have to teach kids about these tools, because these tools are powering the world that they really live in. So Seema, I think you're absolutely right that that finding a way to get this in and giving the kids the time to mentally engage and process through that is going to help them not only in their studies, but help them understand the world that they live in, because it's such a different world now.
I'm going to jump on top of that idea as well, Kathleen, because it's, in the Montessori world, we're all about practical life, real experiences, and developmentally appropriate to where they're at. So I work with junior high kids. And junior high is it's an interesting transition period where their brains aren't necessarily plugged into that sort of rote learning, book learning in front of a classroom, sitting at a desk. And so for them to do things that have a immediate, obvious why are we doing this? Because we're competing in this competition and we need to build this robot, or we need to plan this symposium. And if you don't do it, people are going to show up and they're going to be really disappointed. So the more and more that we as an education community around the world can focus on practical, meaningful, real world experiences that connect our students to adults that are doing that work in the real world, the better off we will be as a whole global society. And robotics is part of that. It's a big part of that because of all the reasons you just said, Kathleen, but there is a tapestry of experiences that our young people need to be having early and often, that are not sitting in a desk and memorizing things. It's just not the way, it's not the way of the world right now. I mean, The future has already happened, and we in the robotics community have realized that, and we're well ahead of the curve because of it. And so
that's really interesting. There's two points that I think all three of you have made that I would really like to pick up on. The first one is around your experience with competitions. I think all three of you have had experience with virtual competitions in robotics at this point. And the other one then is around that real world experience and preparing students for what life is going to be like as they grow up. So I think we can start with maybe the competitions end of things, and I'd like to get what were your takeaways from being involved with a virtual robotics competition. What were the things that you found about it that were, maybe different to a live one, or what worked well with it, that kind of thing. I think Kathleen, we can start with you. That'd be great.
Great, thank you. So my experience has been around both teachers and students. We thought one of the ways to knock down those barriers for educators is to give them a competitive forum where they could try it out and see what it's like to compete. So what we found was very successful about the virtual experience was, number one, the ability to not feel as, and Seema, I know you're an engineer, so don't take this the wrong way, but for them to not feel like they couldn't fix it if it broke, right? Because that's that physical side. So half of your barrier is this thing when I set it on the table going to work, and then am I going to be able to code it right or move it right? So we removed one giant barrier on the physical side. And the surveys that I got back, people found that to be very empowering, that they were only dealing with one set of new challenges on the programming side. They weren't immersed completely in this physical world where they were also feeling on the spot to have to also master how to build things and how to put things together. That was very, very powerful.
Seema or Tree, how does that sort of line up with your experience of those virtual competitions?
For my experience, like because I do run a robotics club after school. So when my students, they took part in Max IQ or the virtual one, I use the robotic curriculum. I did go through the curriculum part to kind of, assist them, help them, prepare them. And they had to brainstorm different ideas, build a robot, program the robot. And, one of the parts that they really enjoyed, like, say for the virtuals, I'm going to take example of Robotify, is that game, that Excel tag, that was like a tag playing at the recess, and that was like, because I couldn't see the game. So I said, what is the game like? And it says, Miss Naik, it's like playing tag at recess, and that was like, they were not even realizing that they're actually coding, and that's the best part, because you know what, end of the day, I want my students to have fun. Is, of course, everything is happening in the background, in their brains, okay? But so through these various robotic competition, they learn to be like persistent, resilient to the challenges. Like, they had to constantly think right away on the spot, okay, obstacles that they had to come across through the entire process. And one of my takeaway, like, they learned to work in a cooperatively. They had to have the team alliance, collaborating with other teams, and communication. So those are the soft skills that these you need when you grow up, you go out and choose a career. And that's the virtual robotics, physical computing, all those opportunities prepare these students for the future.
You're so eloquent with this. I love it. We had a similar experience with the tag, the Axel tag. I think that may be what you're talking about. But with the purely virtual format, yes, you remove that element of, is my physical robot going to break? And you just make it pure fun. And that, I think that's excellent. We also participated in that hybrid, which it sounds like, Seema, maybe you did as well, in the World Championships, where we had to live stream the actual robots competing. And so that presented all kinds of challenges, but that broadband piece also is a big part of that. Equity, equality, you need access to high-speed internet. It's just, you have to. That has to be a global human right at this point. But also what I love about the robotics competitions in general, be they online or otherwise, is that it allows students to try to, and teams of students to beat their personal or their team best. They don't need to win the whole tournament. It's not like a sports kind of engagement where if you either it's zero sum, there's the winner and then there's a loser. We had a student who all he wanted to do was break 100 points. That's all he wanted to do. He didn't care if he won, what place, he didn't want a trophy. He just wanted to beat that 100-point threshold, which he did. And he was so happy that he threw down the controller to celebrate, and he still had 6 seconds left. He could have gotten more points, but he was so excited that he beat that threshold. So it allows you to, that just creates improve even more involvement and engagement. If you make it exclusive, if you make it so competitive that the people that you're only focused on winning and being the absolute best, then you leave people behind. And so all of the formats, online format, the physical robot, the VEX, Robotify, all of these, it's such a nice system because it just pushes you to work together as a team, which has all sorts of engagement possibilities, and also just to do your personal best. And those mechanisms are built in organically, or maybe intentionally, if it is well done, to Robotify and others. It's such a good format for so many reasons.
That's great. I'd like to go back to that other point, the sort of preparing students piece. Seema, you actually spoke a little bit about it there while you were talking about the competitive side of things. So how do you see like the virtual robotics and coding kind of fitting in with that preparing students for life as it's going to be in the future?
I would say that, they do prepare students well for a changing future. Where they have to constantly find solutions. We know in life, like every day, we are looking for solutions, making decisions, adapt to change, so being flexible. So these learning tools, equip them, with the problem solving, communication is big, working as a team is not like we talk about, I always say there's no I in team. Working as a team is so important because, it's such a self-centered, sometimes society gets that way, but you can't make it happen unless you are working as a team. And that's my biggest thing, problem solving, critical thinking, and all these platforms allow students to, get there where they need to be, say, even as a teacher, I have to work as a team with other fellow teachers. So bringing them to robotics and coding, opportunity to them, giving them time, to think, find solution. And that one of the things I really like is there's not just one solution. They constantly brainstorm, okay, this works, this doesn't work, let's try something else. So, again, they don't give up easily. So self-esteem, moving forward, you need that in your career. The world is competitive, so I think these learning tools, they really, really prepare them.
It's interesting, Tree. I actually seen, as soon as Seema mentioned self-esteem there, that got a reaction. Would you like to expand on that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The I can, and that I can is the difference between a child being successful and a child struggling their whole lives. We so often we beat that self-esteem out of kids by making them feel like they're stupid because they can't do fill in the blank. It's what's that saying? If you told a bird, you evaluated every bird on whether they can ride a bicycle, every bird would fail out and think they're miserable, and there'd be no birds left in the world. They'd all be depressed and sitting and trying to ride bicycles. But yeah, no, that self-esteem part is so huge, as is then this problem-solving part. But I also want to piggyback on this real-world application piece, because again, I'm coming from the environmental science, conservation, biology world, and how much technology is used to solve real world problems and problems that matter to our young people. So things like climate change, things like biodiversity, think carbon footprint, all of these pieces, technology is right in there. And so we are able to connect with people in our community, not only our community college, but out in the real world. We're right on the Great Lakes. And so that's why we did underwater robots originally, because underwater robots are used in all kinds of applications right here outside our doors in the water in the Great Lakes. But then these aerial drones, that piece being added to the equation, that those are used all over the place. And we just used, one of our students has an aerial drone, and we just went out and we used that. In fact, actually, then now we're also using the one from the robotics competition, now that that's included, to go survey the canopy at our land lab, right? Flying this drone up into the trees so they can see part of the ecosystem that they couldn't otherwise access, which of course biologists are using right now to survey areas that you couldn't otherwise access. So if it's meaningful to something that they care about, and increasingly this young generation with Greta Thunberg and all that's going on, they're inspired, they want to make a difference, they want to protect the world. And for us to hand them this technology, hand them robotics and say, here's a tool that you can use to do the thing that you care about. You might have the kid that is just obsessed with spider monkeys, but now they become obsessed with robotics because they can use robotics to learn more about or protect spider monkeys. Myriad applications.
Yes, and to build on that, the I can then followed by I am. And a lot of times, especially the girls, don't see their own identity in these careers. And being able to have them say, I am a drone pilot and I did this. I am a roboticist and I did this. It empowers them. And my gosh, being in Florida, and Seema, I'm sure can relate,
Yeah.
the space economy is coming and the new jobs there are going to be out of this world, literally. And so having kids be comfortable both in that physical world and then using the virtual tools to operate robots, to operate drones, as we're getting ready to set up home on the moon and eventually Mars, we are going to need kids who are very, very comfortable to be fluent in this digital world of coding a drone or coding a robot and knowing that it's going to carry out its mission somewhere that they can't physically go. So that bridge to careers is huge, and getting them excited from when they're in elementary school and getting them past that middle school hurdle and then getting them into high school and then college and careers. It just pulls it all together, and the Robotify platform and other digital platforms are just so wonderful, because without their existence, we couldn't make that real world connection that you may one day be coding this robot or this drone and it is exploring another planet. So the foundation we can lay to build their self-esteem and self-efficacy and sense of belonging in these fields, it just, there's no way to do it without digital tools like this.
And Kathleen, that's so fantastic, because while we were all doing in the middle and the thick of COVID, and we're online and we're doing these those Robotify coding, then they land the rover on Mars, and then they test out the helicopter, and our students are the ones you wouldn't think would be glued to the screen to watch the little tiny test moving 10 meters up and 10 meters down with the helicopter. They were glued because it was real and it was exciting, and it's Mars, and they could do that.
Yes.
And they're gonna maybe live there, their kids, their grandkids, or go to the moon, or it's all happening right now, and they are a part of what's really happening out there. So good.
That's great. Look, guys, I genuinely could sit here and I would be happy spending my day listening to your thoughts on this. You've all got a wealth of experience and a lot of ideas and thoughts around what we've been speaking about today. Unfortunately, we kind of have to fit it all in together. So what I would like to do now is just by way of a wrap up, if I could get each of you to take a moment and think and what is the number one message if you were speaking to yourself as a young educator coming back into or starting in education, or if you're going to speak to a group of educators, what's the number one message, your number one takeaway from today that you would like to put to them? I think maybe Tree, if you'd like to start.
Sure. Make it real. Connect to all of your students. They will respond if you give them the opportunity. And collaborate. You're in Ireland, and we're here. I'm here in Northern Michigan. You're down in Florida, but we could easily have people from all over the world having this conversation. They'd all be saying the same things. Collaborate. If you can't find somebody in your immediate community, don't worry. There's a broad, massive community that's going to be there to support you in doing this. And it is easy. It is fun. I'm a botanist, and I'm talking about flying drones. So I promise you there's something in it that you will get excited about.
Great. Seema?
I would like to, add to what Tree says. Exactly. Connect and collaborate with the other STEM educators, around the world with the technology that is possible. And the educators who have never tried coding and robotics, I would really encourage them to use it. And I will tell them that do not get intimidated, because that coding and robotics, like even at my school, they think, oh, you can do it because you're an engineer. And I said, no. I'm a civil engineer and environmental engineer. And so I am the same thing, like, what Tree is saying. I never did computer science. So yes, I can understand the technical part, but I had to learn myself. So at least give it a try, and let the students take the lead, because they are digital natives, and they'll pick up faster pace. You don't have to know everything. Just guide them. So I would just say, just try it, and then you'll see sky is the limit.
Great. Kathleen, we'll leave the final word to yourself.
Oh, wow, what pressure. Well, thank you. To me, the big takeaway is the world is changing so fast, so we have to change with it. There's no limit to the end of learning. And for us to be successful, we have to learn every day. And this is for all of us. I might be a reading teacher, or I might be a nurse, or I might be a scientist, whatever I am. These opportunities are for everybody, for girls, for people who are underrepresented in the fields now. This is the time for everybody to get in and learn every day and try something new and not give up, because I can be whatever I want, and I can belong in this field. So if I can belong, everyone can belong, and we need to all be lifelong learners.
That's fantastic. That's such positive messages coming from all of you. Thank you for your time today, Seema Naik, Dr. Kathleen Schofield, and Tree Sturman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.